The financial industry spent 30 years convincing you that $1 million was barely enough to retire on. Here's what they did not show you. The people who retired with $1 million, the boring index fund people, the conventional advice followers, most of them ended up with 4 to 5 million. The crisis they sold you was real. The direction of it was backwards. A man retires in 2005 with exactly 1 million. No hedge funds, no private equity, no clever timing. Standard index funds, modest bond allocation, conventional wisdom of his era. He dies 30 years later with $5 million in the bank. He spent his entire retirement moderately terrified, checking his brokerage account every 3 days, cutting costs he had no reason to cut, living smaller than his balance required. He was accidentally accumulating while consciously worried. Different story. A man retires in 2008. Lehman Brothers collapses within weeks of his last day of work. His portfolio drops more than 40% in the first year. By every model, every projection, every piece of advice he ever received, he is supposed to be ruined. He ends his retirement with $4.2 million. A woman retires in 2015 with $800,000 below the magic million threshold and ends with $3.8 million. None of these people timed anything. None of them were brilliant. They followed boring, conservative advice built specifically to prevent them from going broke. And every single one of them spent the whole time convinced the next crash would finish them off. That is the actual story of American retirement, not the one in the financial planning brochures, not the one in the scary articles about savings gaps. The real story. People following the most conservative strategy ever designed are accidentally becoming multimillionaires while living like they are one bad month from disaster. So this is not a video about whether 1 million is enough. That question is almost too small now. The real question, the one that will reframe every financial decision you have made in the last decade, is whether the entire concept of a retirement number has been engineered to serve the people selling it rather than the lives it is supposed to fund. I am going to show you the math they are counting on you, never running yourself. Here is what we are actually covering today. The 4% rule, the most conservative retirement withdrawal framework ever published, was designed specifically for the worst market conditions in recorded American history. When applied to average conditions, it does not produce modest survival. It produces multi-millionaires. The financial industry knows this. The incentive to not explain it loudly is enormous. The result is millions of people working years longer than they need to, hoarding money they will never spend, optimizing a number instead of a life. I am going to show you why the target you have been given is almost certainly wrong for your specific situation. What the real math looks like when you strip out the fear and the incentives, and what you can actually do with this information before the week is out. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. They model Social Security incorrectly and use spending assumptions that have not reflected how retirees actually live in decades. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the real weak points in your plan. And I only ask for your email to send the report so I do not store any of your financial data. Link in the description. Okay, here is the metaphor I want you to keep in the back of your mind for this entire video, because it is going to become more accurate the further we go. You are packing for a 2-week trip somewhere. You throw in 14 pairs of underwear, 1 per day. Then you think about the long flight, the potential luggage delay, the uncertain hotel laundry situation, and you add 4 more. You leave with 18 pairs for a 14-day trip. Rational. Running out of clean underwear in a foreign country is genuinely bad, and the cost of bringing extras is essentially nothing. You pack for the worst case, because the downside of overpacking is trivial compared to the downside of underpacking. Sensible. Here is where retirement completely breaks this metaphor in a way I find genuinely strange. When you overpack a real suitcase, those extras sit there, unused, wasted space, static. But when you overpack for retirement, when you save beyond what your actual life requires, those extra pairs of underwear do not stay static. They multiply. You leave with 18 and come home with 45. Because the safety margin you built into your savings does not sit idle. It compounds. And that compounding is what turns cautious, frugal retirees into accidental multimillionaires while they are still eating at the early bird special and wearing shoes from 2017, we are going to come back to this suitcase more than once. But first, in a few minutes, I'm going to show you the Social Security math that should be the very first number in any honest retirement calculation. But before I get there, I need to explain why the 4% rule you have heard about means almost the opposite of what most people think it means. The 4% rule, you know it. Save $1 million, withdraw $40,000 per year in year one, adjust upward for inflation each year after that. Repeat for 30 years. Simple, settled, the gold standard. Except here is what very few people actually know about how this rule was created. William Bengen, a financial planner in California, published it in 1994. His research question was specific. What is the maximum withdrawal rate that would have survived every 30-year period in recorded American financial history? Not average periods, not typical periods. Every period, including retiring right before the Great Depression, including retiring at the start of the 1970s when inflation ran in double digits, when the stock market lost nearly half its value and did not recover in real terms for almost a decade. He found that through all of those catastrophic scenarios, a 4.1% withdrawal rate survived. He rounded down to 4. He was publishing the floor for catastrophe. And somewhere between 1994 and now, survived every worst-case scenario in recorded history, got quietly transformed into, this is your retirement target. Those are profoundly different statements. Here's what the actual research shows. Wade Pfau, probably the most credentialed researcher on retirement income in America, found that in median historical scenarios, not best case, the median, a 4% withdrawal rate, does not deplete the portfolio over 30 years. It grows it. The median retiree following 4% ends 30 years with more than double their starting balance. And Michael Kitces, who has essentially built his career mapping every historical retirement outcome ever studied, found something that should genuinely be headline news. Retirees following the 4% rule are statistically more likely to end their retirement with 5 times their initial wealth than they are to run out of money. 5 times. Not slightly ahead. 5 times their starting number. But nobody leads with that because you will probably die richer than you expected. Does not sell advisory accounts. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but people are withdrawing 4%, right? So why is this surprising? Here is what makes it more interesting. JP Morgan published a study tracking actual withdrawal behavior in real retirees. The most common withdrawal rate was not 4%, it was not even 3%, it was 2%. 2%. People so scared of running out that they pulled half of what the conservative rule allowed. Let me show you what 2% does. You retire with $1 million. You withdraw 2% annually, that is $20,000 per year. Your portfolio grows at 6%, which is below the historical average for a diversified portfolio over long periods. End of year 1, you withdrew $20,000. The portfolio grew by $60,000. Net change, positive $40,000. You are richer than when you started, and you have been spending. Year 10, your balance has grown to approximately $1.5 million, and you have pulled roughly $200,000 in income over the decade. Year 20, you have approximately $2.3 million. You withdrew around $400,000 in income, and your balance has more than doubled. You packed for a blizzard. The weather was fine. The extra pairs of underwear multiplied in the suitcase while you were rationing the ones you actually brought. Why does this keep happening? Why do people who could spend more keep spending less? There are 3 distinct phases of what I call the retirement fear cycle, and understanding them is worth more than any specific savings target. Phase 1 is the accumulation hangover. You spent 30 or 40 years building the habit of saving. Every paycheck, you set money aside. Every time you did not spend, it felt financially responsible. That habit does not dissolve the day you retire. The identity of being a saver is embedded deeply. Switching to being a spender feels like a moral failure. It feels like dismantling something you spent decades constructing. Phase 2 is loss aversion in practice. Kahneman and Tversky proved in 1979 that losses register as roughly twice as psychologically painful as equivalent gains feel positive. So every time you withdraw from your portfolio and watch the balance drop, even when the withdrawal is planned, budgeted, and completely rational, your brain processes it as actual loss, not metaphorical loss. Actual, damage. The rational brain knows this is the plan. The older brain, the one that evolved to interpret any resource depletion as danger, does not care about the plan. Phase 3 is the uncertainty spiral. What if I live to 102? What if there is a crash right when I stop working? What if healthcare costs explode? Every what if adds another pair of underwear. Together, these three phases produce what researchers call the consumption gap, the difference between what retirees could safely spend given their actual financial position and what they actually spend. Studies tracking retirees in the top wealth quartile found they were spending at a rate that would leave them with more than 5 times their starting wealth at death. 5 times. They could have lived dramatically better for decades and still died wealthy. The brain would not let them. A financial advisor sits down with a couple who have $800,000 saved. He asks very gravely, "What keeps you up at night financially?" The husband says, "Running out of money." The advisor nods and says, "Exactly. You really should keep working until you hit 1.2 million to feel truly secure." What he does not mention is that his 1% annual management fee on $800,000 generates $46,000 from this couple over 5 years before they even get to the number he is recommending. His incentive is not their freedom. It is their continued accumulation. But sure, they are the ones with the problem. Now here is what nobody is actually telling you. And I want you to stay with this because it changes the retirement math for almost everyone watching. Social Security is doing something in your retirement plan that the financial industry really does not want to be the first thing you calculate. There was a contractor named Earl, retired at 64 in a small town in Ohio, never made more than $72,000 a year in his life. He had a little under $300,000 saved when he hit his mid-60s. His bank-referred financial advisor looked at the numbers and told him he was underprepared for a 30-year retirement and should strongly consider working until 67 to shore up the gap. Earl had never been especially trusting of people who made money off his decisions. He went home and did the math himself on a yellow legal pad. His Social Security at 64, $2,100 per month. His wife had worked part-time. Most of her adult life she was getting $1,300. Together, $3,400 monthly, $40,800 annually. They tracked their actual spending for 3 months. Real receipts, real statements, real categories. They were spending $46,000 per year. The gap between their Social Security and their spending was $5,200 annually. To cover $5,200 at a 4% withdrawal rate, you need $130,000 in savings. Earl had $300,000, more than double covered. Earl retired at 64. His financial advisor lost the account. Earl is doing fine. That story is not extraordinary. It is ordinary. It feels extraordinary because nobody starts the retirement calculation with Social Security. They start with a portfolio, they panic, and by the time they get to Social Security, they have already accepted the scary number as their answer. Here is what the Social Security Administration's current benefit schedule actually shows in early 2026. The average benefit for a retired worker is approximately $1,970 per month. For a married couple where both partners worked at average wages, you are looking at roughly $3,800 to $4,000 monthly, combined $45,000 to $48,000 per year, guaranteed, inflation indexed, every year, for life. The average retired household spends approximately $57,000 to $60,000 annually. If a couple receives $48,000 from Social Security and spends $60,000, their portfolio only needs to generate $12,000 per year. At 4% withdrawal, covering $12,000 requires $300,000 in savings. $300,000. Not 1 million, not 800,000, 300. The financial industry wants the number to be 1 million because 1 million in a managed account at 1% annually generates $10,000 per year in advisory fees. 300,000 generates 3,000. The incentive to inflate your target is not hidden. It is structural. And for the dual high earner couple, both with full careers, Both having maximized contributions, individual benefits, can reach approximately $3,800 per month each at full retirement age. Together, $91,200 per year in guaranteed inflation-indexed income. Their portfolio could sit entirely untouched, compounding year after year while they live on Social Security alone. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content, otherwise YouTube's algorithm genuinely may never show you my videos again. Here's a number that initially reads as alarming, but is not. About 25% of retirees rely on Social Security for 90% or more of their income. Most people hear that and feel sympathy, those poor people. But that number includes dual income couples pulling in over $90,000 per year from Social Security who do not need to touch their investments at all. They are in the 90% Social Security dependent category, while their brokerage accounts compound untouched. The statistic looks dire. The reality is a spectrum. Somewhere on that spectrum is almost certainly a version of you who could retire earlier than every calculator you have ever used suggested. There is a guy I keep thinking about as I work through all of this. I will call him Frank, 61 years old, regional sales manager, 29 years at the same company, 1.1 million in his 401k and IRAs. His wife Linda has 200,000 in her own accounts. Together, 1.3 million. Every retirement calculator Frank has used says he's in good shape, but should consider waiting until 65 for Medicare eligibility. Frank has a plan 65. The Medicare argument feels rational, feels responsible. But Frank has a deeper problem that has nothing to do with math. He has been watching his account balance increase for 29 years. Every month it goes up. When it goes up a lot, he feels okay. March of 2020, the brief pandemic collapse. Frank did not sleep for 2 weeks. He called his advisor 4 times. He was talked out of selling. He is grateful for that. But Frank has built his entire sense of financial safety around the number going up. The day he retires, the number starts going down by design. And Frank knows, logically, that this is the plan. This is what the savings are for. But 29 years of accumulation identity does not dissolve in a spreadsheet conversation. Frank is going to come back before this video ends. What happens to Frank is actually the whole point. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. You think the problem is not having enough money. The actual problem is not knowing what you will spend. Those are different problems. The financial industry treats them as identical, which turns out to be very useful for the financial industry. Here is how most planning tools model retirement spending. Take your current income, apply 70 to 80%, call it your retirement spending target, the 70% rule. It sounds reasonable. No work expenses, no commuting costs, no dry cleaning, no business lunches. You need less. Except the Employee Benefit Research Institute has been tracking actual retiree spending for decades, and what they find consistently is that spending in the first decade of retirement tends to run roughly equal to or slightly above pre-retirement levels for people who are healthy and mobile. Because when you suddenly have 40 hours a week back, you fill them. Travel, the renovation you kept postponing, hobbies you always meant to start, helping the kids with a down payment. You are not at a desk anymore. You are living. Then something shifts. In the second decade of retirement, ages 75 to 84 spending drops by roughly 11 to 14% compared to the first decade. After 85, it continues to decline. This is not poverty. It is preference. Life simplifies naturally. Long-haul travel becomes harder. Big purchases feel less necessary. The gravitational pull moves toward comfort and familiarity, not novelty and acquisition. So when you plan at 55 for what you will spend at 82, you are almost certainly overstating it. And the tools designed to help you plan are built by institutions with a direct financial interest in that overstatement. One analysis of retirees in the top wealth quartile found they were spending at a rate that would leave them with more than 5 times their starting wealth at death. They could have doubled their lifestyle and still died richer than they needed to be. They did not know that. They were scared the whole time, adding more pairs of underwear to a suitcase that was already bursting. In a few minutes, I am going to show you Frank's numbers. But first, here's the part that I think most clearly explains why the system produces these outcomes and why it is not going to change on its own. There's a story about a fisherman on a small island who catches enough fish every day to feed his family and sell a little extra. A businessman arrives and says, get a bigger boat, hire a crew, net more fish, sell more, build a fleet. The fisherman asks, then what? The businessman says, then you would be wealthy. The fisherman asks, then what? Then you could relax, spend time with your family, enjoy life. The fisherman looks at him and says, what do you think I am doing right now? The financial industry will always have a reason for the number to be higher. Always another risk to hedge, another scenario to stress test, another year to work for the sake of safety. But the word safety in that sentence means safety for them, not for you. Safety means you keep contributing. Safety means assets under management stay high. Safety means their revenue is stable. Think about the incentive structure precisely. If you believe your retirement number is 1.2 million instead of 500,000, the fund manager charging 1% annually collects $7,000 more per year from your account. Over 20 years, accounting for compounding, that fee differential does not cost you an extra $14,000. It costs you something closer to $90,000 in lost growth. Multiplied across millions of clients, the recommendation to aim higher is enormously profitable. I spent over 10 years running my own business, surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers who showed me how money actually moves through institutions. The first thing I learned to ask about any piece of financial advice is who profits when I follow it. When the recommendation is save more, the answer to that question is almost never you. The retirees who end up richest are often the people who ignored the inflated targets and stopped contributing earlier because they let their existing savings compound without distraction, without fees eating into growth, without the psychological weight of perpetual accumulation keeping them at a desk when their life was happening elsewhere. The fisherman already has what the businessman is promising. He is living it. The real tragedy of this story is not the businessman. It is the fisherman who listens. Who gets the bigger boat? Who builds the fleet? Who misses his kids growing up? Who retires at 70 with $7 million and spends 3 years trying to remember what he used to enjoy before everything became optimizable. Now let me give you real numbers. David, 62 years old, engineer, 35-year career. He has $720,000 in his 401k and IRAs. His wife Sarah worked part-time while raising 3 kids, went back full-time in her late 40s, and has accumulated $180,000. Together, $900,000. Not quite the magic million. David has been running the same online retirement calculator for 3 years. It consistently outputs 1.2 million as his target. He is planning to work until 67, 5 more years. Here is what those calculators are systematically getting wrong. They are either ignoring Social Security entirely or processing it in a way that drastically understates it. David's projected Social Security at 62, which he could claim right now, is approximately $2,300 monthly. Sarah's is approximately $1,400. Combined, $3,700 per month, $44,400 per year. David and Sarah track their actual spending for 6 months. Real statements, real receipts, real categories, not estimates. Their actual annual spending, $62,000. The gap between what they spend and what Social Security provides, $17,600 per year. To cover $17,600 at a 4% withdrawal rate, you need a portfolio of $440,000. David has $900,000. He has more than double what the math requires. Now, project it forward. David retires at 62. He and Sarah withdraw $17,600 annually, adjusting upward for inflation. The portfolio grows at a conservative 6%. After 25 years, his estate is worth approximately $2.1 million. His children inherit $2.1 million that David accumulated while being convinced he was underprepared. He worked 5 extra years for a margin of safety he already had 3 times over. 5 years of alarm clocks. 5 years of Sunday night dread. 5 years of I will do that when I retire. 5 years of meetings that were emails he was forced to attend in person for a number that was already in the rearview mirror when he started worrying about it. And the online calculator was never technically wrong. It output 1.2 million. It asked the wrong question. It asked, What do you need to replace your income entirely from savings? Instead of asking, what do you need to cover the gap between your guaranteed Social Security income and your actual spending? Different question, wildly different answer, wildly different life. Somewhere right now, there is a 66-year-old with $1.4 million in the bank who declined his daughter's invitation to her birthday weekend because the market feels uncertain. His advisor's quarterly newsletter arrived that same week. Buried in a sidebar on page 7 was the line showing he paid $19,800 in management fees over the past year. He did not look for it. He never does. Frank ran the math. Finally, his Social Security and Linda's together, $4,000 monthly, $48,000 annually. The real spending, $63,000 per year. Gap, $15,000. At 4%, covering $15,000 requires $375,000 in savings. Frank has $1.3 million. He is 3.5 times covered. He accounts for private health insurance from 62 to 65, roughly $9,600 per year, more than he expected. That brings the annual gap to $24,600. Covering that at 4% requires $615,000. Frank still has $1.3 million. Still more than double the math requires. Frank retires at 62. He builds furniture in a garage workshop he had been meaning to set up for 20 years. He sells a few pieces locally, about $6,000 in income that was not in any of his projections. His portfolio barely being touched because Social Security is absorbing most of the lifestyle cost, grows by over $80,000 in a moderate market year. By the time he reaches 65 and Medicare kicks in, his balance is higher than when he retired. He looks back at the 3 years he almost gave away, the meetings he would have attended, the travel he would have postponed, and he genuinely cannot reconstruct what he was afraid of. The suitcase he packed for the worst possible weather came home with 45 pairs of underwear that multiplied in the dark while he was building tables and having dinner with Linda on a Tuesday night. Here is your actual playbook. 3 things, not a 30-step framework. 3. First, go to ssa.gov today and create an account if you do not have one. Look at your projected benefit at 62, 67, and 70. Those 3 numbers will do more for your retirement clarity than any advisor meeting you have ever attended because they are not theoretical. They are your calculated benefit based on your actual earnings history, going back decades. Most people are genuinely shocked by how high these numbers are. That shock, that re-anchoring, changes everything that follows. Second, track your real spending for 90 days. Not what you think you spend, not what you hope you spend. Pull the actual statements, categorize everything, find the real number. Then, separate fixed costs, housing, insurance, food basics from discretionary spending. Because discretionary spending in retirement shifts, it does not disappear. Travel replaces the work wardrobe budget. Hobbies replace the commuting costs. The total number moves less than you fear. Third, once you have those 2 inputs, calculate your actual gap. Real annual spending minus guaranteed annual income equals what your portfolio must generate. Divide that number by 4%. That is your retirement target, not the industry's target. Yours, built from your life. Add a 20% buffer, not 100%, 20, because life does deliver surprises. You want a reasonable margin. You do not want to spend your most mobile and energetic years perfecting a number you will never fully deploy. Look, the story at the top of this video, the man who retired in 2005 with $1 million and died with $5 million, that is not a lottery winner. It is not an anomaly. It is the median outcome of a framework designed for catastrophe deployed into ordinary life. The people who retired at the wrong time with the wrong amount and still ended up with more than they started, they are not rare. They are invisible because nobody runs the headline, "Retirees following conservative advice die richer than expected." That headline does not generate fear. And fear is what the industry is selling. The catastrophe they warn you about outliving your money almost never arrives the way it is described. The catastrophe they do not warn you about arrives quietly, without headlines, to the 63-year-old who keeps working for 3 more years, while his parents' health declines, his kids' childhood's close, and his own energy slopes slowly and irreversibly downward. All because a calculator built by someone who profits from his continued contributions told him he needed more. The math to solve this is not complicated. It does not require sophisticated strategy or a premium advisory relationship. It requires a social security statement, 90 days of honest spending, tracking, and arithmetic. Earl did it on a yellow legal pad in Ohio. Frank did it at a kitchen table on a Tuesday evening. The system is not rigged against you. It is built for someone else's goals. Once you run your own math, the numbers are almost always better than the industry wants you to believe. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the most expensive asset you own is not in your brokerage account. It is the years you keep giving away to a number you already passed.